If Sonic is the wind, then what does that make Tails, Amy, and Knuckles? The wind has been used to describe Sonic as a character for years with games like Black Knight, 06, and Sonic Rush, just to name a few. He's always portrayed as having wind-like elements as he runs and attacks. No, he's not an airbender, but thematically it makes perfect sense. The wind can be an overwhelming force of power that can cover vast distances. But it can also be a gentle push, a comforting presence that can give you a sense of calming relief and even uplift your spirit. The wind can guide you and make you feel free. In every way, this is Sonic. But again, what about his friends? What sort of element or part of nature can be best used to describe the characters closest to Sonic and represent not only who they are, but what they stand for? And the first character we should direct this question to is the two-tailed genius himself. So, if Sonic is the wind, then what is Miles' Tails' power? Interestingly enough, the path to answering this question lies within an important scene within Sonic Frontiers, one that provides the basis for understanding what sort of element or part of nature Tails can thematically represent. In this scene, Tails asks,
Sonic, am I a burden to you?
Wow, and how did you come to this well-thought-out concern?
You see, Tails is a genius, but sometimes he can be too smart for his own good. And in Frontiers, we see him overthink and overcomplicate his own self-worth when comparing himself to the one person he looks up to more than anyone in the world, Sonic. It causes his usually sound mind to become distracted and scatterbrained. In other words, no matter how high his level of critical thinking, his emotions and self-imposed pressure can get in the way when it comes to thinking of himself critically. It's sad, but very relatable. But Eggman puts it best with his egg memo in Frontiers.
Sonic's here, so it's no surprise Tails is too. It's a pity. Young Prower has a keen mind and loads of potential, yet he's fixated on worshipping Sonic. And again, maybe that's for the best. Given all the trouble he gave me in Station Square and on the Ark, I think I'd prefer him wasting his potential lingering in Sonic's shadow.
Although a bit harsh, he is not entirely wrong, as it's true that Tails can be, at times, too fixated on how Sonic thinks of him. Not all the time, no, but sometimes his own self-worth is dependent on not who he already is, but on who he believes he should be for Sonic and his friends. And this sentiment is apparent within the rest of the scene.
Whenever there's a crisis, I'm either running away or standing on the sidelines. You're always rescuing me when all I do is follow you around.
In this moment, he sees himself as no more than a weight, a literal ball and chain that Sonic is burdened to drag around as he constantly follows behind him. He feels he's unfit to help someone like Sonic, the big hero. Now, in Sonic's response to this, we want you to focus on what he doesn't say rather than what he actually says.
Who was it who stopped Eggman from blowing up Station Square, huh? And who broke me out of prison, or saved me from the Deadly Six's trap?
Then I'm wildly inconsistent.
Did you catch it? The words that Sonic avoids. In these sorts of situations, when trying to comfort someone, one might typically think to say, "What are you talking about? You never run away. You don't just stand by. You're not just following me around while I save you." None of that is true. You're being too hard on yourself. You're amazing. And while this isn't inherently an issue, and whenever friends say this, it's often coming from a place of love and care, don't get us wrong. Sometimes it's this way of comforting that can actually do more harm than good. Because we can't ignore the mistakes we make and the flaws we have, or else we'll be too arrogant to grow and too ignorant to understand ourselves as we constantly avoid learning about ourselves by never risking failure, never taking the time to find out in what ways we suck. But if we only admonish our failures, then we'll find ourselves pretty unhappy pretty much all the time. It's not a healthy way to live. And so we need to recognize the good things about us too, the awesome, successful things, while also being aware of our shortcomings. And that's exactly what Sonic does here. He doesn't rebuttal, correct, or even ignore the flaws that Tails is telling Sonic he has, because he can't, because it's true. Tails is being very harsh about it, but it's true. At the same time,
dude, relax. You've got brains like Eggman, speed like me, and can fly with your butt.
What Sonic does is acknowledge Tails' strength while not ignoring his flaws. He emphasizes in this scene that it's okay if you're bad at this, just remember you're also good at that. It's okay
if you still need help sometimes. That's just part of growing up.
When did you get to be so insightful?
I have my moments.
Okay, but why is this important? Why does this scene serve as the basis for figuring out Tails' thematic concept? Well, it's because it's this scene that puts all of his core flaws out on the table, and it's the most recent game to do so. Like we said earlier, and as Sonic exemplifies, you can't ignore the flaws. And in our case, we especially need to focus on Tails' flaws because Tails' flaws are a core focus of his writing more so than any other character. While every character, Knuckles, the Chaotix, Rouge, and everyone else have flaws, sure, Tails is usually the only one whose stories are more focused around his. It's not apparent in every game he's in, but it's definitely a core aspect of his character and writing. You see this in Sonic Adventure with his want to prove himself and stand in his own.
The fate of Station Square depends on me. Sonic! I've changed a lot since I've started hanging with Sonic. But I can't depend on him forever. I know I can do this by myself. Okay, Eggman, bring it on!
In Sonic Riders, there's a small plot surrounding Tails' insecurities and doubts over his own technical prowess after Wave makes fun of him.
Who does he think he is?
Well, I don't think he's all talk, you know. I better be on my toes during this competition.
I never imagined anyone would enter the race with such a piece of junk.
Sorry, Sonic. I just need to fine-tune a few things, then your extreme gear will be at 100%.
Hey, Tails, you always do your best, so don't worry.
Yeah, but she has a point. She's a really brilliant mecha mechanic. Sonic, don't worry, I'll unlock the secret of the extreme gears for us.
And of course in Frontiers, we see him struggle with those same feelings of self-doubt. Again, this isn't in every game, but in those that it's in, no other character's stories revolve around their own flaws like it does for Tails. Or at the very least, even if they do, it still occurs way more often with Tails, and we love that about it. They use Tails to bring a deeper focus to personal problems, and that helps players empathize with his flaws and find the means to overcome and work on their own flaws. What we're trying to say is that we need to focus just as much on Tails' flaws as his strengths when it comes to thinking up a concept for him. So yes, Tails always follows Sonic around. And yes, sometimes he overthinks too much. So, what's something that always follows the wind around? Always being pushed and pulled by the wind and following its flow, while also tending to be used as an idiom whenever you're overthinking or getting distracted with too many thoughts. You probably already guessed it, but let's add in his strengths. Tails is a genius, and what his friends have come to appreciate about him the most is that he is reliable. Tails provides a metaphorical shade that allows Sonic and his friends to rest and feel assured. Because it's Tails, he can think his way out of any situation. If no one else has a plan, Tails will. If no one else knows what to do, Tails will. Finally, in terms of abilities, he flies. In terms of appearance, he's fluffy. And in terms of personality, he is gentle and soft. So, what fluffy, soft thing flies in the sky that also provides shade and comfort? Yes, if Sonic is the wind, then Tails is the cloud that is lifted by it. Like the clouds, Tails follows the wind, Sonic. He can sometimes think too much and have his head in the clouds. His presence, like a cloud's, provides a relieving shade thanks to his brilliant mind. His theme song and adventure, Believe in Myself, is all about him wanting to fly high and reach the highest of all the heavens, literal clouds. And most importantly, like Sonic and Tails, the wind and clouds are inseparable. Also, let us know down in the comments, what elements or part of nature or really anything would you use to best describe Tails, Amy, and Knuckles? Do you agree with what we say throughout the video? Or do you have some other interpretations? We'd love to read them. And if you enjoy our content, and only if it's worth your time, please consider subscribing. It really helps us out. Now let's continue. If Sonic is the wind and Tails is the clouds, then what is Amy Rose? Besides being an avid shopper and tarot card enthusiast, she's everyone's favorite heartwarming hammer-wielding hedgehog. Speaking of which, let's start with her hammer, as this is a defining character trait of hers, or at least a recurring aspect of her character that pops up a bunch. The Pico Hammer, her signature weapon that she can use to hit, flip, spin, and stir up little tornadoes. This hammer is a very peculiar weapon in the Sonic world, not for what it does, but for who holds it. This giant hammer isn't given to a huge brute or buff thug like we've seen in tons of other popular characters throughout fictional media, but instead, it's given to a sweet and innocent-looking young girl. And this is important, not groundbreaking today, well, maybe for back then, but this is vital because it makes us ask a question that can help us understand what element or part of nature could best be used to represent Amy Rose. And that question is, why does she fight with a giant hammer? It may be a silly question, but stay with us on this. Because this hammer, the Pico Hammer, is actually the most recurring weapon in the Sonic series, so it deserves attention. A character's signature weapon is just as important to their overall design and theming as any other part of their design. And what we see right here, well, this is what we would call juxtaposition, which is basically just two things next to each other that create a contrasting effect. We see some shady-looking guy with a knife in a dark alley? Awesome! We love that here. We know exactly what's about to happen. We're excited, not excited, but satisfied, as it makes perfect sense. But if we switch out that guy for a little girl holding a doll saying how pretty the dark alley looks up close, we start to frown. This whole scene isn't normal, and that makes us stressed, makes us question, makes us think terrifying thoughts of being possessed by a possible demon child. But the point is, juxtaposition can tell us a lot about a character. And in this case, it's a massive, dangerous-looking weapon being held by a sweet and innocent-looking girl. And Amy isn't the only one to have this kind of popular character trope. There's Maka from Soul Eater with her huge scythe, Ururu from Bleach and her giant bazooka thing, Mei from Guilty Gear and her entire boat anchor she lugs around, and there are many more. In Amy's case, it's her Pico hammer. Weapons like this are usually reserved for the strongest and mightiest of characters, but we believe it actually makes perfect sense for Amy. Amy Rose is a loving and caring person. She stands up for what's right and selflessly risks her life to save others out of the goodness of her heart. She's relentless and doesn't back down. Even when she's face to face with danger or with someone who has darkness in their heart, she stands her ground and lets her emotions shine through. She's extremely passionate about the things and people she cares about. But she isn't by any means dainty. She's fierce, energetic, and has a fiery temper that keeps her driven and proud, even to the point of being reckless and overbearing. Overall, Amy is one of the strongest and mightiest characters in this series. Not push a mountain or lift a building strong, but truly strong in the real way. The way that keeps you standing under all the weight of the world. The way that keeps you motivated in high spirits when everything around you seems bleak. The true strength of love, the strongest of all other emotions. Like Amy, love can be fierce and overbearing, but also relentless and pure. And that is what this hammer represents. Again, like with all weapons, it's a part of the character design, an extension of that character that represents something. Like the feelings of love, a hammer is direct, leaves a lasting impact. It's heavy, it can be intimidating at times, it can be destructive if used incorrectly, but it can also be used to fix things that are broken. I know, we're reading into it too much. The Pico hammer first debuted in Sonic the Fighters, and its purpose was to help embellish her tomboyish nature. That's what the wiki says, we get it. But we can't help but read into this. In our eyes, it's a defining aspect of her character that helps to illustrate how love is where her true strengths lie. The love she uses, the hammer she uses, to protect the people she cares about. So with all that being said, we finally understand what best represents Amy. If Sonic is the wind, and Tails is the clouds, then Amy is the blossoming tree that the wind and clouds pass by. Like these flowering trees, Amy Rose provides a sense of sweet comfort and a feeling of bliss for all those around her. Like a blossoming tree, you can always count on her to be there for you. You can rely on her to be strong and firm, to be able to weather any storm no matter how tough, to shower you with lovely petals that make your heart feel warm inside. Trees that bloom with beautiful flowers are symbols of love, as well as representations of life and the care and patience it takes to cultivate and protect that life. They are lovely, but also hold a powerful strength that comes from within. This is Amy Rose. But if Sonic is the wind, and Tails is the clouds, and Amy is the blossoming tree, then what is Knuckles the Echidna? For starters, unlike Sonic, who is constantly on the move and forever flowing free like the wind, Knuckles is somewhat still. When it comes to his duty, Knuckles is literally stationary, an overseer of the things that happen around him. In terms of personality, he's hard-headed, can be a little stubborn, and his naive tendencies make him the type that can't be easily swayed when he thinks he's on the right path. That doesn't mean he can't be deceived, as his naivety makes him prone to getting tricked. But the thing about Knuckles is that he's not just an entirely gullible guy. He doesn't just believe anything that anyone says. In fact, he'll stick to his own guns and be way too stubborn to change course. The only problem is that his ignorance can get the better of him. And so he'll hear Eggman say one thing, it sounds smart, to him it makes sense, and so he'll follow through with the full belief that he's in the right. And then not even his close friends can get through that hard head of his. In other words, the only way you're getting Knuckles to switch lanes is if he himself actually believes in what you say. And then it becomes his decision, and not yours. Otherwise, you'll just have to beat some sense into him, which is fine because he prefers a tussle instead of a talk. And that's another important aspect about him. His strength is just as formidable as Sonic's speed. In fact, he is a wall, able to stop even Sonic in his tracks. He can hurl boulders, crush the earth, and dig through solid rock like it's water. So we're working with something that is stationary, serves as a sort of watcher of everything around it, can be used to describe concepts related to being hard-headed or stubborn, and is also something that's incredibly durable, sturdy, and strong. Well, luckily for us, Knuckles already lives upon the answer itself. If Sonic is the wind, then Knuckles is the mountain where the wind, clouds, and blossoming tree resides, protected upon the sanctuary of solitude and strength. Like a mountain, Knuckles stands strong and stationary. A mountain is always there, a reliable presence that's often seen as a great overseer of the nature and life that exists around it, just like Knuckles. And when describing someone who is especially physically powerful and sturdy, people will sometimes use the term, he is like a mountain. In a metaphorical sense, this also works for someone who is hard-headed with idioms like stubborn as a rock. Mountains are full of rocks, and Knuckles literally lives on a mountain. Plus, a mountain, with all its caves, houses and protects gems and emeralds like he does with the Master Emerald. Mountains are also home to nature and ruins, two things he finds great peace and wonder in, as he spends most of his time, when he's not standing guard, uncovering ruins and exploring the vast beauty of the wilderness around him. What's also super poetic is that the relationship between Sonic and Knuckles can also be seen within the relationship between the wind and mountains. A mountain can stop the wind, just as Knuckles can put Sonic in his place and stop him in his tracks. Yes, characters like Shadow, Eggman, and many more have exhibited that same capability, but Knuckles was always emphasized to be the guy that Sonic's speed can't just run through. He knocks the super out of him in his debut game. In the second movie, he literally catches Sonic like a baseball.
Do I look like I need your power?
And while they constantly go back and forth knocking each other over, their dynamic is very clearly an unstoppable speeding object versus an immovable wall. In other words, the unrelenting force of the wind versus the impenetrable mountain. And whenever wind travels to the mountains, it becomes stronger due to the mountain's altitude, varying levels, canyons, etc. Likewise, the wind is often responsible for helping to shape the very structure of a mountain. In a way, a mountain can make the wind stronger, and the wind can make the mountain stronger. It's a bit of a symbolic stretch, but it's one that reminds us of the rivalry and friendship that Sonic and Knuckles have. One that builds the two of them up, with their unique strengths clashing to make each other stronger. But we aren't done quite yet. Although we focused primarily on Sonic's core friends, since Sonic as the Wind is already explored very thoroughly, we couldn't help but wonder, does the concept of the wind still apply to Super Sonic? And personally, we believe that while Sonic is the wind, Super Sonic is something else. So, if Sonic is the wind, Tails is the clouds, Amy is the blossoming tree, and Knuckles is the mountain, then what does that make Super Sonic? When thinking about what could best represent Super Sonic as a character, we felt it only right to use wind as a basis to start off with, since that's what best represents normal Sonic. And of course, this is just the super form of Sonic. His character doesn't actually shift or change in a dramatic way, but we'd still love to give a different descriptor for him, because now we aren't just dealing with Sonic himself, we're dealing with the unstoppable power of the Chaos Emeralds. These emeralds are, well, chaotic in nature. They are mysterious, powerful, and the source of limitless energy. Anyone who fully wields this awesome power essentially becomes a god. I mean, these things can stop time, let you travel through time, their energy can blow up a planet, and then be used to restore that same planet. They can energize massive killing machines. They can fuse two halves of a god and make them whole. They can do pretty much whatever the plot wants them to. And this is what makes them so compelling. Not their raw power, but the innate potential any hero or villain can achieve when wielding that raw power. Eggman wants to use them to conquer the world and create Eggman Land. Black Doom wants them to enslave humanity and power up his alien army. Mephiles wants them to merge with Iblis and become the sun god Solaris. Chaos wants them to transform his body into an unstoppable force of destruction. The Echidna tribe wants them, along with the Master Emerald, to win wars and battles of conquest. Gerald wants them to power up the Eclipse Cannon to destroy humanity. The Ancients want them to power up their robot titans to defend against an ancient threat, etc., etc. Each of these characters have their own ideals and goals, and the Chaos Emeralds are a means to an end to help them achieve those goals quicker and with less opposition. And that brings us back to Sonic. He uses them to do what he always does, stop the big bad and save the day. So if the Chaos Emeralds are just a means to an end and only allow a character to reach a higher potential, then what can we derive from this when expanding on Sonic's foundational motif of the wind? Well, what still blows free, but is mixed with elements of chaos and energy? What can be more powerful than the pressure of intense winds, and, at the same time, what can be more calming and freeing than a gentle breeze? The answer is a storm, specifically the Eye of the Storm. That is supersonic. The Eye of the Storm is a place of tranquil peace and relief. It's a safe haven surrounded by a torrent of unstable energy and immense power. It's the center, the control, surrounded by chaos. That is what supersonic represents. As no matter how dreadful everything around you may seem, as long as supersonic is near, then you can rest easy, knowing this storm will pass. Like the Eye of the Storm, supersonic is that beacon of light, that ray of hope that remains steadfast despite being entirely engulfed in destructive power and insane speeds. And just like finding the Eye of the Storm, gathering the Chaos Emeralds won't come easy. But once you find the Eye, once you gather all 7 emeralds, everything will change, as you'll be forever mesmerized by the shining golden light surrounded by a surging aura of violent and immeasurable power. So in the end, everything is wrapped up in a neat thematic bow of elements and nature that also connect with the wind in some way, shape, or form. If Sonic is the wind, then that makes Tails the clouds, Amy the blossoming tree, Knuckles the mountain, and Supersonic the Eye of the Storm.